434 by Leader Lamberth. And Leader, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there is an amendment out of sub that is it's just a technical change, but if we could adopt it, thank you.
3874.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. We have amendment 38. What was it again? 3874. We're going to put the amendment on the bill. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. The amendment's on the bill. Leader, if you'd like to explain the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good to see you today, committee, and thank y'all for considering this bill. The bill itself is very straightforward, and then I have a dear friend of mine who's going to be testifying in a moment about why the necessity of this bill, why this bill is needed in the code. So the bill itself creates a lifetime order of protection. Most orders of protection, as you know in this committee, are for basically a year at a time. And so it's usually for an incident or something that has occurred where a judge looks at the incident and says, look, it is in the best interest of everyone to keep an individual away from another individual. So it is a legal order that is centered down that can have many different qualifications in it on types of contact. But it has to be renewed each year. In some circumstances where a violent crime has occurred and either a murder or a rape or a high-level felony has occurred, it's not right to have a victim or the victim's family go back every single year and have to ask the court to renew that order of protection. In many instances, that a person is in prison, and even getting them served is very difficult. That's why in here, this gives up to a year for the order of protection to be served. We hope it will be served very quickly, but it does allow for additional time there so that nothing's dismissed on the technicality. But this will create a lifetime order of protection. And I have with me today, if Mr. Chairman, if you would allow us to go out of session in a moment, Miss Nikki Goser, whose husband was gunned down right in front of her several years ago. And many of you know Nikki because she worked right here in the legislature for Chairman Halford and worked for him for several years. And she can share with you her story, and I think you probably have already received some material from her on why this bill is needed.
Without objection, we're going to go out of session to hear from the witness. Ms. Goser, you are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume I can take this off now. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Nikki Goser. I am Executive Director of the Crime Prevention Research Center, but I am also a victim of a violent crime, and I'm here speaking in support of the Lifetime Order of Protection bill. My situation is only one example here in Tennessee. Unfortunately, there are other victims of horrific crimes in our state who need your help. On April 2nd, 2009, my life was turned upside down, completely shattered. My husband, Ben, was murdered in front of me by a man who was stalking me. My husband and I were inside of a restaurant, and my stalker showed up out of nowhere. My husband had already asked him to leave me alone about a month prior, and I realized at that point that I was being stalked. I asked management to please remove him from the venue. When management confronted him and asked him to leave, he pulled a .45 from under his jacket and came up behind my husband, shot him in the head, then stood over Ben and continued to fire 6 more rounds into him in front of myself, 50 witnesses, and security cameras. He put the gun back under his jacket and started to walk out like no one would know that he was the shooter. I knelt beside my husband in a pool of his own blood, wishing his life back into him. But it was no use. My husband was dead. The horrific scene will be with me for the rest of my life. A United States Marine who just happened to be in the crowd tackled that man, and he was held until the police came. When the police searched his vehicle at the crime scene, they found 2 more guns, ammunition, a baseball bat, binoculars, gloves, rope, and a knife. The detectives said that he actually purchased the binoculars and the baseball bat that very day. Before the murder trial took place, Ben's murderer sent me 2 letters from prison. What he did was he sent these letters that were meant for me. He would send them to my former attorney that handled my wrongful death suit against him. It was the only address that he had. I was already dealing with grief, trauma, and loss. This was just too much. I sent copies of these letters to the prosecutor. I told them, look, I need this to stop. I want a restraining order. There needs to be extra charges, and nothing happened. Nothing was done. So I gave up, and I told my attorney, look, just please don't tell me anymore. I can't handle this. Just don't tell me. It was the only thing I could do to protect myself mentally and emotionally because nobody else was helping me. So what do you do? So he honored that request from a very distraught widow. And for years, my attorney did not tell me. And then I actually reached out to him in late 2019. And that's when he finally told me about all the other letters that had come after many years. This is trauma on top of trauma for me. He sent pictures of himself, Valentine's, Christmas cards, holidays that people spend time with their spouse, holidays that I was forced to spend alone because he murdered my husband. He would say things like, in these letters, like, even if you move on and find someone new, I will always love you. He asked me to write him, and he says he thinks about me every day. These letters are meant to terrify me, and they do terrify me. This fixation has lasted for many years. He's basically saying, look, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere, and I want to see you. It is terrifying. A 1-year order of protection is not going to help me. These letters show a continued fixation and obsession that is a clear threat to myself. You know, many victims of stalking worry about what their stalker may be capable of. I don't have to guess what he's capable of. I know what he is capable of. He has already proven that. My fear is that he will come looking for me one day. Unfortunately, he is going to be released. His release is just in 7 years. He's being released early for good behavior. I fear for myself and my loved ones. I worry for other victims out there who are facing similar horrific circumstances. So I ask you all to please vote aye, and please help those of us that need you. Thank you.
Ms. Goser, I applaud your courage, your strength to come testify. Your story is horrific. It's also very moving. I'm sorry it happened to you. Members, do you have any questions for the Representative Parks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nikki, I just want to tell you, it's very courageous for you to be here. I know we know each other from, being the family here at the legislature, but this is different when one of our own is sitting on that side and telling a story like this. And, thank you for having the courage to tell it, because I know it's possibly causing you to relive the whole situation again. But thank you again, and be encouraged. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Chair Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do commend you for being here. I know it's hard and difficult, and I remember when you were here and we had many conversations about this, and no one should be tortured for the rest of their lives over something that they could not help. Even if you could have, you don't need to be tortured your whole life. But we do need to put a stop to this any way that we can. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
There's no further questions. We will go back into session, and thank you again for testifying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Leader, do you have any further comments before we open to questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than to thank Chairman Halford for being here. He is a co-sponsor of the legislation and obviously knows Nikki very well, so I appreciate him being here today to both support her and the legislation.
Members, are there any questions for the leader? And Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Leader, for bringing this legislation. I'm definitely on board and signing on. Now, can these lifetime orders be removed by any, and is there any mechanism to have them removed or anything like that?
Chairman, Leader.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The same mechanism for any other order of protection. So, I mean, a petition would be made with the court. And again, there's nothing in this bill that guarantees that Nikki or any other victim of violent crime would be granted an order of protection. It is up to the judge to analyze that circumstance to determine whether or not this would be eligible. I cannot fathom in a situation like Nikki's that it would not be granted. But it is up to a judge, and a judge could, at some juncture, have the discretion to vacate that order if appropriate.
Yes.
Representative Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there no additional charges that can be levied against the individual that was still trying to contact her while in prison?
Leader.
I believe he's under federal indictment currently.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Leader, for bringing the legislation to me. It's a good bill.
Thank you. Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman, to the sponsor. So for this specific instance, if this gentleman is paroled early, is there a way to tie this order of protection? I mean, I would like to see him, if he violates this order of protection, to go back and serve the remainder of that sentence in the maximum afforded and without the possibility of any further parole whatsoever. Is there a way we can, and I know that maybe that's a different piece of legislation, but I mean, if this continues, that's definitely unacceptable.
Leader.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the spirit of the comment. I think everybody here knows my feelings on parole. I mean, it's not right for victims to have to go and beg the parole board to leave folks like this in, but that's the system we have until we all decide to change it. If someone were to violate this, depending upon the nature of the violation, it could be anything as low as a civil contempt or anything as high as an A misdemeanor. That A misdemeanor, if convicted, would run, I would think, in any judge that was issuing a sentence on that consecutive or after any sentence they already had in prison, which would severely affect their ability to be able to get parole. And even if they receive parole, they would have a sentence to go to afterwards. So it definitely, if someone violates this, and Nikki didn't mention this, but I mean, there's she may have sent it around via email to you all. I mean, there's a stack of letters. And this guy is just as fixated on her now as he was the day he killed Ben. And so, I mean, every single one of those would potentially be a new violation and a new misdemeanor every single time he sends one, and that could continue to just stack up. And so that lifetime order of protection, what that means is if somebody violates it, those charges can continue to stack up.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader Lamberth, I just want to thank you for bringing this legislation, and obviously, Nikki, your testimony was very moving. I've prosecuted orders of protections before, and I don't believe I've heard a story quite like yours before. So I appreciate you coming here and coming up and testifying and telling us what you've gone through, because often a question that I've received from folks that are seeking order of protection is sometimes you can get them up to 5 years, and their response is, I can only get it for 5 years. So I'm so thankful, Leader Lamberth, that you have brought this legislation that someone could actually have protection for their lifetime. I'm certainly going to be in support of this legislation. Thank you very much for bringing it. It's a very good bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Leader Lamberth. I guess I didn't thank you enough, but I do want to. I haven't. Okay, I'll thank you some more. Okay, I do want to know: is it so? So my marketing wheels are rolling, and I want to know, how do we make the state aware that this law will exist? I'm wondering if we can require the judges to state this to the victim, that this is a tool that you can use, you can tap into, especially in a situation like Nikki's, where it's required for the judge to explain to. Is that in the legislation?
Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your kind words. It's not in here, but I will tell you that it absolutely is the intent is that every judge that's hearing a case of this nature, every district attorney and victim witness coordinator that is walking with a family through these type of horrendous incidents would make sure that they know that this law exists if we all pass it and it becomes law. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to need to be required. I hope that this will go far and wide, that this type of protection is there. And it's just a piece of paper. I mean, every victim knows that an order of protection cannot truly wrap them in the cloak of safety, but it does let them know that y'all have got their back, that you're standing with Nikki every day, and that the law is standing with her and every other victim every single day. It's something that they can use in every circumstance, in any kind of contact, to make it clear to people like this evil person that's in prison, stay away from her. Just don't ever go anywhere near her again.
Representative Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I by no means want to tamper with your bill, but do you not feel it would be a good a friendly amendment to add a requirement to the judges to explain that this is available to the victims upon, conviction?
Leader.
So you never know what fiscal review is an independent body, and I never know when I file pieces of legislation, just like none of us do, on what the fiscal note is going to be. I will say that the fiscal note currently is not significant, and I am reluctant to change the bill in any way, shape, form, or fashion that might in any way affect what is a very positive fiscal note for this bill. That's my only reluctance.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll give it to you afterwards.
Yes,
Okay.
leader, so
Thank you.
noted. Are there any more? Representative Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor, for bringing this legislation. I fully support it. I would indicate to my colleague that it's my experience that the victim resource officers are fully aware of and advise all victims of violent crimes and all crimes that they have the right to seek orders of protection. So I don't know that the amendment would really necessarily be necessary. So thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Members, are there no further questions? Questions have been called without objection. We're going to be voting on House Bill 434. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Leader, you might want to have a sign-on sheet form passed around here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll do so, and thank y'all so much for supporting this bill. It means a lot
There you
to Nikki and to hundreds of families throughout
You're
the
off
state.
the
Thank y'all.
calendar.